Hello, good morning, and welcome to your Breakfast Connect show right here on Africa Business Radio. Here on Africa Business Radio, we are very enthusiastic about entrepreneurs and startups, which is why on our breakfast show today, I have someone very interesting joining me for conversations. Entrepreneurship contributes to the economic well-being of every single country. Specifically, the level of individual entrepreneurship is crucial in the process of developing and building economic potential, especially here in Africa. Well, joining me to have conversations around this is someone who has played in the finance sector for the longest time. She is the first black female owner of a regulated brokerage. She was also voted one of the top 50 black African women entrepreneurs to watch by Entrepreneur magazine, an award-winning serial entrepreneur and financial analyst. I'm talking about CEO and founder Ubuntu Invest, Nelisiwe Masango. Good morning and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Rachel, and good morning to your amazing listeners. Thank you so much for having me.
Right. Now, Nelisiwe, you've been in the finance space. You've been operating in that sector for the longest time. I mean, you have your own brokerage. You also founded Beer Run Investment in 2013. You've done a whole lot, which is why I'd like to have your opinion on the level of financial literacy in Africa, based on how long and how well you've played in that sector so far.
Perfect. Well, I've been in the finance industry for about 10 years now, and I started out, as you'd mentioned, with Beer Run Investment, which is an accredited training provider. And now I'm the founder and CEO of Ubuntu Invest, which is a regulated brokerage. So in terms of understanding the financial space, it's really important for us to prioritize financial literacy. So there are a few concepts that basically affect most people's financial decision-making skills. It's only three. The first one is basic numeracy. That relates to interest rate calculations and understanding compounding. The second one is understanding inflation. And the third one is understanding of risk diversification. And this is where trading and investing comes into play. So when we talk about someone's level of financial literacy, we measure using those three concepts. So in Africa, it's really sad to see that more than 50% of Africans aren't financially literate. And this is because we don't prioritize it from childbirth. We don't prioritize it in our schools. We don't prioritize it in our curriculum. It's as if math, science, and languages are more important, and then it's up to you to sort of learn how to handle your finances when you get your first salary, and that's the problem that a lot of adults face, that you only realize that you have to know how to balance your sheets, income versus expenses, how to save, how to invest, how to get out of debt. A lot of adults only realize that when they are in debt and when they do have a job. So what we aim to do is somewhat alleviate that and educate our clients so they have the intellectual capability and the knowledge to make better financial decisions.
And when conversations are held about financial literacy and entrepreneurship, it's always about, how it affects the economy. But if you take a closer look at it, you see that it really comes down to the household, and there are questions to how this deficiency in financial literacy actually affects decision making in the homes first, before we talk about, how it translates to the economy as a whole.
Definitely. I mean, some changes in consumer habits and financial products have made it harder for Africans to manage their finances. So I look at things in three ways: the past, the present, and the future. So in the past, we used to use a lot of cash for our daily purchases. That is starting to change. Currently, we're in a world of cryptocurrencies where even the financial industry as a whole is being challenged because of the fourth industrial revolution and how digital transformation is impacting the financial industry. And the next one is the future: planning for retirement, pension funds. So when it comes to financial literacy and consumer behavior, every single individual is responsible for themselves financially. So when we talk about the past, the level of debt that you have, it's important for people to understand credit scores. It's important for you to understand how to save, how to supplement your income as well. But we also have to think about the future. Africa has one of the youngest populations in the world. So we have a lot of potential for us to be successful. So it's incredibly important for us to also place a lot of emphasis on retirement planning and pension funds, and as I'd mentioned before, so consumer behavior, one thing consumers need to understand is they have to keep up with the times. Where the finance industry was 10, 20, 30 years ago and where it is now is a completely different ballgame. So it's important for us, as time changes, as technology improves, we also need to prioritize financial literacy, because previously to do something as, sending money to your family, you could do that at the bank. Nowadays, you don't need to do it at the bank.
Exactly.
You can send money using your phone. So it's important for us to also prioritize the education of the digital side of finance to ensure that no one in our generation and no one right now is left behind. So the consumers are always the ones that are affected, and it's almost like as the industry grows, as technology improves, as, we get more digital assets in the space, a lot of people are being left behind. So this is why it's important to prioritize financial literacy from the basics of it. So as the times evolve and improve, no one is left behind and no one falls through the cracks.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Now, speaking of no one being left behind, I'd like us to talk about the gender gap in financial literacy. I mean, you are the first black female owner of a regulated brokerage, which is a massive deal. It's an amazing stuff. When I saw it, honestly, I was in awe. And then if you look at it, on the other hand, is it disappointing in some way that more women are not in this path, and why that is the case, really?
Very true. So the reason why I emphasize, being the first black female is because, number one, I want to inspire other young girls as well. I want to inspire people of color, not just people in South Africa, but people in Nigeria, people in Ghana, people in Benin, all over Africa and all over the world, because it's all about representation.
Right.
When I got into the industry, all of my mates were white males because they dominate the industry. So I was fortunate enough to be given these opportunities. So as I move forward, I always want to make sure that I create opportunities and I pave the way for other women to be in the industry, as well as other black people. The disadvantage of this is to only have one of the first black females in 2021 shows you that the industry in itself, the finance industry, has a very long way to go.
True.
But the future is bright at the end of the day. So when I go back to the question that you asked about financial literacy and the gender gap, it becomes very hard to give the exact number, but if I relate it back to the financial gender gap difference. In Africa, 70% of women are excluded financially. The continent has about $42 billion of financing gap between men and women. So this is according to a study by McKinsey Power of Parity report that then says we're advancing a woman in Africa, we're sitting at 0.58 and we should be sitting on 1. So that in itself tells you that even in corporate, even in business, in the workspace, women aren't getting the same salaries as men. So before we can even talk about financial literacy, let's talk about bridging the gap between men and women in terms of us getting paid, because a woman's responsibilities, women have a lot of responsibilities, not to say one has more than the other, but already if a woman is paid less, if she is just as qualified with the same amount of experience, it means that the playing field is not even.
True.
So in order for us to encourage financial literacy, especially in women, we have to ensure that the policies advance to the point whereby it favors women and women are in the forefront just from a financial wage gap difference. And then financial literacy will move forward, because as the confidence builds, women will also feel like that they'll be able to have the confidence to start negotiating their salaries, because that's another thing that women don't do. Over 80% of women, not just in Africa, women in general, cannot negotiate their salaries.
True.
So before we talk about financial literacy, let's talk about women's rights in that space, and then financial literacy will come, because according to stats, in the household, between a male and female household, women are more financially educated than men, even though the men make more money and they're the ones with the final say. So I think we really need to look at those policies.
Indeed, and it's very key because these policies, these recommendations could significantly boost entrepreneurship activities as well as enhance financial literacy skills, across the continent. But just before I let you go now, Nelisiwe, the government, I believe, has a role to play. And when you mention policies, I know you just mentioned, trying to make the wage gap or fill in the wage gap or make it more even for both male and female. But then what specific policies do you think the government can put in place? Is it something we should start, from home, or is it something that should start from schools? Because we have a long way to go, really. It's not something that we might meet in the next 1 year or the next 2 years. So I'd really like to know from your professional point of view what specific policies the government should put in place or private sector players should put in place to see that we are able to fill in this gap.
All right, so it's 3 things here. In order for us to move forward, not just as a continent, but as a people, everyone has to sort of do their part. Everyone has to pull their weight. So 3 things here. The first one, in the household. I'm a firm believer in the quote, charity begins at home. So it's important for us, even after listening to this podcast, I encourage the audience to go home and start opening up the conversation of finance. Finance is incredibly uncomfortable. No one really likes to talk about it, but it's time we start talking about it. Spouses, speak to your partners about what your salaries are, how much debt you have, what are your financial goals, how can you help each other. Parents, speak to your kids. You give your kids pocket money every week, you give them lunch money, but out of that lunch money, how often do you encourage your kids to save? How often do you encourage your kids to look at the stock market, look at cryptocurrencies? I mean, we have 10-year-olds that speak about Bitcoin. So go home and speak to your kids about this. So that's the first part. It has to start at home. The second part is government. Government is here to serve its people, and all governments, I believe, try to do as much as they can, but it's up to us to put pressure on them to change the policies. For example, mathematics and science are prerequisites, like it's mandatory. Every single school in every single country teaches mathematics and science. Why can't we incorporate financial literacy? Because whether you like it or not, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, money makes the world go round. So everyone has to know how it works. So I encourage governments to start incorporating financial literacy in the curriculum from the very first grade all the way to university. And then the third part is corporate and the private sector. All financial institutions should improve financial literacy, because look at a bank as an example. Most of us have bank accounts. We either have bonds, we have some of our money saved up there. So it's also up to these financial institutions that charge us ridiculous amounts, bank charges and fees every month. It's up to them to facilitate financial literacy workshops and programs free of charge for their clients to upskill themselves, because people that are educated and are more literate make better decisions. So it's basically the only way for us to move forward is in the household, in our friendship groups, in our relationships with our kids and in our families. The second one is for government to put these financial literacy courses in schools free of charge for everyone to access, as well as the corporate. If you're going to charge us every month, give us something for free, like educators.
Wow, this has been very enlightening. Thank you so much, Nelisiwe. Indeed, we need to make practical steps to see that we, fill the gap and move forward. Things have changed. I mean, as you said, we have 10-year-olds talking about crypto and saving apps and all of that. So I believe I'm very positive about the future and entrepreneurship in Africa. Thank you so much once again for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And for all your audience, they're more than welcome to visit our website, www.ubuntuinvest.com. I'm not one to give advice without taking it. We have a free portal of education. We have a bunch of videos that people can watch free of charge to improve their financial literacy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I've been talking with the founder and CEO Ubuntu Invest, and that's not all. She was voted on the top 50 Black African women entrepreneurs to watch by Entrepreneur Magazine, an award-winning serial entrepreneur and financial analyst. Thank you once again. The Breakfast Connect show continues in just a moment. I'll be right back.